The people of Umuta could hear her laugh, even from miles away. Queen Nedi's laugh was sharp and cold, sending shivers down the spines of everyone who heard it. But the people did not know that beneath the golden crown and royal robes, the queen hid a terrible secret. Queen Nedi ruled with cruelty, always watching for those who might rise against her. She trusted no one, not even her own children. Many whispered that the queen's heart had turned to stone. Once a kind woman, she had changed, but no one dared to ask why. They only knew that anyone who crossed her path faced an uncertain future. One night, as the wind blew hard through the streets of Umuta, Queen Nedi called her most trusted servant. "Make sure no one ever speaks of the king," she hissed. "They must forget he ever ruled." The servant nodded and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the queen alone with her thoughts. No one in the kingdom knew what really happened to the king, and she intended to keep it that way. The people of Umuta had lived in fear of Queen Nedi for years. No one dared to speak against her. But one day, a stranger arrived in the village. He was tall, with a face that showed he had traveled far. His name was OBINNA, and he spoke with a calm voice that made the villagers curious. OBINNA didn't speak much about where he came from or why he was in Umuta, but he soon gained the trust of the villagers with his kind heart and strong hands. He helped those in need, repairing houses, planting crops, and listening to the troubles of the people. Everyone liked him, but no one could guess the real reason he was there. In secret, OBINNA had come to Umuta to find out the truth about Queen Nedi. He had heard stories about her cruelty and the strange disappearance of the king. He believed that the queen was hiding something, and he was determined to find out what it was. Word about the stranger in the village soon reached Queen Nedi. She sat on her throne, her sharp eyes narrowing as her guards told her about the newcomer. "A stranger helping the people? This is no simple man," she muttered. "Keep an eye on him." Queen Nedi had long feared that someone would come to challenge her. She had worked too hard to keep her secret, and she wasn't about to let anyone ruin her plans. She knew that the people were tired of her harsh rule, and a stranger like OBINNA could easily turn them against her. The queen sent out a warning to all her guards. "Watch him closely," she commanded. "If he tries anything, deal with him. No one will take my throne." Late at night, when most of the villagers were asleep, OBINNA walked through the quiet streets. He was looking for clues about the king's disappearance. He knew that the queen's power was tied to whatever secret she was hiding. If he could uncover the truth, he could free the kingdom from her cruel rule. As he walked, OBINNA overheard two servants talking in hushed voices. They spoke of strange things they had seen in the palace, a room no one was allowed to enter, and the queen whispering strange words to herself. OBINNA listened closely, his heart racing. He was getting closer to uncovering the truth. Without hesitation, OBINNA decided that he needed to get inside the palace. The only way to find the answers he was looking for was to go where no one else dared to go. But he knew it would be dangerous. The queen's guards were everywhere, and if he was caught, it would be the end of him. OBINNA knew he needed a plan to sneak into the palace. The next day, he returned to the village and spoke to an old man named Ez, who had worked in the palace many years ago. Ez was one of the few who had served the queen before her heart turned cold. OBINNA sat with Ez, listening carefully as the old man told him about a secret entrance hidden at the back of the palace. "Only a few know about it," Eze whispered. "It leads directly to the queen's private chambers, but beware, the queen trusts no one. Her guards are everywhere, and she has eyes in places you wouldn't expect." OBINNA thanked Ez and made his way to the palace that night. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, making the night darker than usual. Quietly, he found the hidden entrance Eze had spoken of, a small door covered by vines. With a deep breath, he pushed it open and slipped inside, knowing he was about to enter the most dangerous place in Umuta. OBINNA moved carefully through the palace, his heart pounding in his chest. The halls were quiet, but he knew that danger could be lurking around every corner. He followed Ez's directions, making his way toward the forbidden room that the servants had spoken of. As he walked, he saw strange things that made his skin crawl. Portraits of the queen's family, but the faces were scratched out and objects covered in dust, as if they had not been touched in years. It was as if the palace itself was hiding secrets, just like its queen. Finally, he reached the door to the forbidden room. His hand shook as he turned the handle and pushed it open. The room was dark, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw something that made him gasp. At the center of the room stood a large wooden box, locked with chains. It looked ancient, as though it had been there for many years, untouched. OBINNA knew this was no ordinary box. Whatever was inside held the key to Queen Nedi's power. OBINNA stepped closer to the box, his curiosity growing. He knew he needed to open it, but before he could figure out how, he heard footsteps approaching. His heart skipped a beat. The queen was coming. Without thinking, OBINNA hid behind a large curtain, just as Queen Nedi entered the room. She walked slowly, her face cold and distant. She stood in front of the wooden box and whispered something under her breath. For a moment, it seemed as though the air around the box shimmered, and then the queen turned and left the room, locking the door behind her. OBINNA waited until he was sure the queen was gone before stepping out of his hiding place. His mind was racing. What had he just seen? What was in that box, and why was the queen so protective of it? He knew that whatever the queen was hiding, it was more dangerous than he had imagined. But now that he was this close, there was no turning back. As OBINNA tried to figure out how to open the box, he noticed something strange carved into the floor near it. It was a message, but the words were written in an old language that he couldn't understand. He knelt down and traced the symbols with his fingers, realizing that it might be the key to unlocking the box. Determined to learn more, OBINNA decided to seek out the village elder, who was known for his knowledge of ancient languages. He knew he couldn't trust anyone else. Before leaving the palace, he made sure to memorize the symbols so that he could show them to the elder later. OBINNA left the palace the same way he had entered, slipping out into the night without being seen. As he returned to the village, his mind was filled with questions. What was in the box? What was the queen hiding? And more importantly, how could he stop her before it was too late? The next morning, OBINNA made his way to the home of the village elder, Elder Anyika. The elder was a wise old man respected by everyone in Umuta for his knowledge of the past and his deep understanding of strange things. OBINNA knocked gently on his door, hoping that the elder could help him solve the mystery of the queen's wooden box. When Elder Anyika opened the door, he squinted at OBINNA with curious eyes. "What brings you here, young man?" he asked in a raspy voice. OBINNA showed him the symbols he had memorized from the palace floor, explaining everything he had seen. The elder's face grew serious as he listened. "These symbols," Elder Anyika began, "are from a very old language, one that speaks of dark and forbidden things. They warn of a terrible power hidden away, one that should never be unleashed. If the queen is guarding this secret, then you must be careful, OBINNA. Whatever is inside that box may be the source of her wickedness." OBINNA sat with Elder Anyika for hours, learning as much as he could about the symbols and the ancient power they referred to. The elder explained that many years ago, a queen just like Nedi had sought power by using dark magic. The wooden box was the key to that power, but it came with a terrible price. If opened, it could destroy everything. "The queen is using the box to control the kingdom," Elder Anyika warned. "But there is a way to stop her. The box can only be opened by someone with a pure heart. Someone who seeks to use its power for good, not evil. If you are brave enough, you might be able to destroy the magic within it." OBINNA felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. He had come to Umuta to help the people, but now it seemed his task was greater than he had ever imagined. He knew that stopping the queen would not be easy, but if he didn't try, the entire kingdom could fall under her dark rule forever. Back at the palace, Queen Nedi could feel that something was wrong. She had sensed a shift in the air, as if someone was close to discovering her secret. Her guards reported that the stranger, OBINNA, was becoming popular in the village, and the queen didn't like it. "He's too curious," she muttered to herself. "He must be dealt with before he causes trouble." The queen summoned her most trusted guard, a man named enkay, and gave him strict orders. "Keep an eye on OBINNA," she commanded. "If he tries to interfere with my plans, make sure he never speaks another word." Enkay bowed and left the room, but the queen's heart was still restless. She knew that OBINNA was a threat, and she would do whatever it took to keep her power. But she also knew that the secret she had kept for so long was becoming harder to protect. OBINNA knew that time was running out. The more he learned about the box and its magic, the more he realized that he needed to act fast. The queen was becoming more dangerous, and if she suspected him, it could be the end. With Elder Anika's help, OBINNA began to prepare for his final confrontation with the queen. He learned how to protect himself from the dark magic that surrounded the box and gathered the courage he would need to face Queen Nettie herself. The elder gave him a small charm, one that would protect his heart from the queen's influence. "This will keep your mind clear," the elder said. "But remember, only you can stop her." OBINNA thanked the elder and set off toward the palace once more. He knew the road ahead was filled with danger, but he was determined to free Umuda from the queen's wicked rule. As he walked through the village, he could see the fear in the eyes of the people. They were counting on him, and he wouldn't let them down. As OBINNA made his way toward the palace, he felt eyes on him. He knew the queen's guards were watching, but he had to move forward. His steps quickened as he approached the hidden entrance. However, before he could reach it, 2 guards stepped out of the shadows, blocking his path. "Where do you think you're going, stranger?" one of them snarled, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. OBINNA's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "I have business with the queen," he replied, hoping to sound confident. The second guard chuckled darkly. "Business with the queen? She doesn't meet with just anyone. You'll have to come with us." Before OBINNA could protest, the guards grabbed him roughly and led him away, not toward the palace, but toward the dark, damp dungeons beneath it. OBINNA's mind raced. He had fallen into a trap. Queen Nettie had anticipated his move and was one step ahead of him. The dungeon was cold and smelled of mold. OBINNA was thrown into a small, dark cell with nothing but a thin layer of straw to sit on. His wrists ached from the rough handling of the guards, and his heart sank as he realized how close he had come to failing. Hours passed, and OBINNA sat in the darkness, trying to think of a way out. He could hear the distant sound of water dripping and the occasional shuffling of the guards' feet outside. He knew he didn't have much time. If the queen decided to execute him, his mission would be over, and Umuta would remain under her cruel rule. Suddenly, he heard a soft whisper. "OBINNA! OBINNA!" It was faint, almost like the wind, but it was unmistakable. Someone was calling his name. He looked around, confused. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was Neka, one of the queen's former handmaidens who had escaped her service long ago. "I've come to help," she whispered, holding up a small key. OBINNA stared at Neka, his mind racing. "How did you?" he began, but she quickly silenced him. "There's no time," she whispered urgently. "The queen's guards are distracted, but they'll be back soon. I've been watching you, and I know what you're trying to do. The people of Umuta need you." Neka quickly unlocked the cell door, and OBINNA stepped out, his legs still shaky from the hours he had spent sitting. "Thank you," he said softly. Neka nodded. "There's a way out through the tunnels. Follow me." They moved quietly through the dark corridors, avoiding the guards who patrolled the dungeon. Neka led OBINNA through a narrow tunnel that opened into a small courtyard at the back of the palace. "This is where we part ways," she said. "Be careful, OBINNA. The queen will stop at nothing to protect her power." OBINNA nodded, grateful for her help. "I won't forget this," he promised before disappearing into the night. After his narrow escape from the dungeon, OBINNA knew he had to rethink his approach. Queen Nettie was watching him closely, and another attempt to enter the palace would be even more dangerous. He needed to gather more allies, people who would stand with him when the time came to confront the queen. OBINNA returned to the village and spoke to a few trusted villagers about what he had discovered in the Forbidden Room. They were shocked and fearful, but they also knew that something had to be done to stop the queen. "We'll help you," one of the villagers, a strong young man named Chuka, said. "But we need a plan. We can't just storm the palace without knowing what we're up against." OBINNA nodded. "We need to learn more about the queen's magic and how to destroy the box. The elder has told me that the box can only be opened by someone with a pure heart. If we can unlock it, we can end the queen's power." Together, they began to form a plan, knowing that the final battle with the queen was fast approaching. OBINNA and Chuka spent the next few days quietly recruiting villagers to their cause. They spoke in whispers, meeting in secret corners of the village at night to avoid the watchful eyes of the queen's guards. The people of Umuta were scared, but many were tired of living under Queen Nedi's cruel rule. They wanted change, and OBINNA gave them hope. Among the new recruits was Adais, a brave young woman who had seen her family suffer because of the queen's harsh policies. She stepped forward during one of the secret meetings. "I will fight," she said firmly, her eyes shining with determination. "I've lost too much to stay silent. If this is our chance to end her reign, I will stand with you." More villagers followed, one by one. The group was growing larger, and with every new member, OBINNA felt his confidence rise. They knew the battle ahead would be difficult, but they were no longer alone. They were building a resistance, a force strong enough to challenge the queen's power. Inside the palace, Queen Nedi grew more suspicious with each passing day. She could sense that something was happening in the village, though her guards had yet to uncover any concrete plans. Her once loyal subjects were whispering behind her back, and the stranger, OBINNA, had managed to slip through her fingers. The queen paced angrily in her chambers, her fingers drumming against the wooden box that held her darkest secret. She'd come to rely on the box's power, but the thought of it being used against her filled her with dread. "Enkay," she called out sharply, summoning her most trusted guard. The tall, stern-faced man entered the room and bowed low. "Yes, my queen? I want you to double the guards around the village. No one is to gather in groups, and anyone who looks suspicious is to be arrested immediately," she ordered. "I can feel that something is coming. We must crush it before it grows." Enkay nodded. "It will be done, my queen." But even as he left to carry out her orders, Queen Nedi couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. She knew that her time was running out. As the villagers prepared for the final confrontation, OBINNA focused on finding a way to open the wooden box. Elder Anika had told him that the key to unlocking the box lay in the purity of one's heart. But OBINNA wasn't sure how to prove himself worthy. "I need to learn more," OBINNA muttered to himself. "There must be something we're missing." With Adais, Chuka, and a few others by his side, OBINNA returned to Elder Anika's home to seek more advice. The elder was waiting for them, sitting quietly by the fire. "You've gathered a strong group," Elder Anika observed, nodding approvingly. "But strength alone will not defeat the queen. To unlock the box, you must first unlock the truth within yourself." OBINNA frowned, unsure of what the elder meant. "What truth?" Elder Anika's eyes sparkled with wisdom. "The box can only be opened by one who is willing to sacrifice everything for the good of others. It tests the purity of your intentions, OBINNA. You must ask yourself, are you truly ready to give up everything to save this kingdom?" The question hung in the air, and OBINNA realized the weight of the task ahead. It wasn't just about stopping the queen's rule. It was about making the ultimate sacrifice for the people of Umuta. And now, he had to decide if he was truly prepared to do that. OBINNA returned to the village with a heavy heart. The elder's words echoed in his mind, and he knew the truth. Opening the box would require him to risk everything. But was he ready? He had grown close to the villagers, and now, standing at the edge of the final battle, the thought of losing them or himself terrified him. Adaizi approached him as they prepared for another meeting with the group. "You seem troubled, OBINNA," she said gently. "What did the elder tell you?" OBINNA sighed, looking out over the village. "He told me that in order to open the box, I have to be willing to sacrifice everything. But I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that." Adais placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "None of us are sure of what's ahead, but you've brought us this far. We believe in you. We'll stand with you, no matter what." OBINNA looked into Adaizi's eyes and felt a surge of determination. He wasn't alone in this fight. The villagers believed in him, and now it was time for him to believe in himself. "You're right," he said with a nod. "We fight together. For Umuta." And with that, the group set their sights on the palace, ready for the final battle that would determine the fate of the kingdom. The night before the battle, the village was filled with an eerie silence. The group of villagers who had joined OBINNA in the resistance gathered one last time before heading to the palace. Each one was filled with nervous energy, but their determination was unshaken. OBINNA stood at the center of the group, his heart pounding. He knew that many of them might not return, but they had chosen to fight for their freedom. He looked around at the faces of Chuka, Adaze, and the others. They were not just villagers anymore. They were warriors, ready to risk everything for a better future. Chuka broke the silence. Whatever happens tomorrow, we fight together. Adaze nodded in agreement. We'll face the queen's magic and her guards, but we won't back down. OBINNA took a deep breath. This is our chance. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone in Umuta. The queen's rule ends tomorrow. They spent the night making final preparations, sharpening spears, whispering prayers, and gathering what little courage they had left. By morning, they would march to the palace. As dawn broke, OBINNA and the villagers set out for the palace. They moved quietly through the village, avoiding the queen's guards who had increased their patrols. The plan was simple. They would enter the palace from different sides and converge in the main hall where Queen Nnedi held court. The tension was thick as they reached the outskirts of the palace. OBINNA signaled for the group to split into smaller teams. He led one group with Adaze and Chuka by his side, while the others flanked the palace from different directions.